Great win and a great atmosphere in DC. You're locked on.
You are Locked On UConn, your daily podcast on the UConn Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On UConn your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Before we dive into today's show, just want to take a moment to say how thankful we are for all of you. This podcast has grown so much, and it's because of fans like you who value great UConn content. Thank you so much to the fans, and really, you're the reason why you've made us a top show on the network. So we're really happy about that. We're proud to say we're the only daily podcast covering UConn men's and women's basketball, the hoops capital of the world. And we're thrilled to bring you the coverage you deserve. And to show that gratitude, we're giving back. We're donating 10% of our revenue to Husky Ticket Project, helping send underserved kids to UConn games, both on the men's and women's side, football, baseball, you name it. If you're enjoying the show, take a moment to subscribe, follow, and leave a review wherever you listen. Thanks again for making Locked On UConn your first listen every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Okay, so fantastic win over the weekend. I'm sorry I didn't do any live reaction shows. We had a furnace issue in our house. I record in our bonus room, which is above the house, and it's kind of my pseudo office / studio. That was okay, but the entire house itself was like living in an igloo for a couple days. So was not going to relegate my wife and kids to the dungeon, so to speak, and then come up here and be all cozy and do a live reaction show with you beautiful people. So I stuck it out with my family. Sorry for no live reaction shows on the men's or women's side, but as far as the men go, really had an incredibly tough loss to Villanova. Then they had essentially the rest of the week to kind of get themselves together. And let's face it, the guy who had the issue that most people were talking about, the two stupid free throws that were missed, was Alex Garabin. And he led the way with 19 points. Solo Ball had 15. UConn has now gotten their record to 13-4 overall, 5-1 in the Big East, in a, I would say a moderately competitive matchup. It was initially. Georgetown came out and threw some punches. You could tell right off the bat. They had those huddles that they show on Fox where Dan essentially just called his team soft. Like he was just like, you guys are playing too soft. Like you gotta battle back. And immediately after that, they really kind of exploded. They got themselves out to a 36-31 lead at the half. But the second half is what really saw UConn open it up. We had a 17-2 run, effectively sealing the game and forcing Georgetown coach Ed Cooley to use two timeouts quickly in succession. And Georgetown struggled to respond as UConn built that lead, right? So at one point it was 64-41, and I felt like, that essentially is when Dan took the air out of the ball. On Georgetown's side, if Curtis Williams Jr. is your leading scorer, that's how you know the UConn defense played better. And we'll tell you later about how they made a nice little jump in the Ken Palm rankings in terms of defensive efficiency. I think some key moments in the first half or for the game was Hassan Diarra's early second half steal and layup, which then helped extend UConn's lead to 8. Then UConn's defense stifled Georgetown throughout, and even without our star freshman Liam McNeely, who missed his third consecutive game due to an ankle injury, although he's out of the boot, which is good. The Huskies maintained their dominance. UConn's victory marked their 9th consecutive win over Georgetown since rejoining the Big East in 2020-21. And, before we really dive into the analysis of the UConn win over Georgetown, I really want to talk about all of the like the pregame atmosphere from friends that I sent a friend to the game. You guys know him, Tyler Remick was able to go through another buddy who had extra tickets. So, talked about the electricity in the building. UConn's head coach, Dan Hurley, you guys know him very well, really reflected on what it means to have Georgetown as a rivalry now. Could this really ever happen? Right. I think it was kind of the Capital One Arena was buzzing with that anticipation. They had 17,000 people, I think 17,500. You kind of dominated most of these matchups, winning the last 8 encounters. Something was a little different about this game. And even before it started, Dan really reflected about what needs to happen in the Big East in terms of having strong programs. And he's quoted as saying, and I was in this Zoom call with him, the Big East is going to struggle without Georgetown and St. John's being top 25 level. So it's great to be going to DC to play a big game. That was his comment before. So this statement was more than a kind of an acknowledgement of Georgetown's improvement. It was a kind of a recognition of the historical significance of essentially this rivalry. And I'm going to get into my personal reflections on that, but Georgetown resurgence under Cooley has been swift after a challenging start. And a part of that is, portal. You hit on a guy like Sorber, as Dan said in the press conference. They lost to Lehigh and plays and teams like that in the past. And now, they're beating larger Power 5 teams, old foes like Notre Dame, Syracuse, Seton Hall. They had a really dominant performance against Creighton. They had a tough loss against Marquette. So the Hoyas are, I don't want to say they're back, but they're pretty damn close. He's turned this around pretty quickly. And part of that is transfer portal, NIL, the whole deal. I'm not a huge fan of Ed Cooley, but Dan had some nice things to say about him. He said Ed's resume speaks for itself. What he's been able to accomplish. He's taken over a program that was struggling with a variety of ways. And if it wasn't for the portal and NIL, in terms of being able to build a team now in college sports, it would have taken Ed much longer because the program was not in a very good state or good condition. If this was a year ago, it would have been a couple of years of brutality for Ed. So he Dan never is shy about giving his honest assessment, but as the Huskies stepped on the court, you could tell the stakes were high. These kids were ready to rock. It wasn't just another game against a struggling Georgetown team like last year. It was a contest that we really had to lock in defensively and offensively and show that we were ready to go, right? Because let's face it, even though people were upset about the last 3, 4, 5 minutes of the game where essentially we scored like 4 points, and Dan kind of took the foot off the gas. Back in the day when I started watching UConn games in the late 80s, early 90s, Georgetown just wasn't just another team. They were scary. They were a legitimate force to be reckoned with. Hoya paranoia was real, and it was something that struck fear into a young kid like me. It's like, oh man, we got to play Georgetown. The Georgetown games meant everything, not just something. They had Big John there. Even after the Patrick Ewing era, they remained formidable. Guys like, I'm just throwing out names like Dikembe Mutombo, Alonzo Mourning, Othello Harrington, of course, Allen Iverson, one of my all-time favorite players in the Big East, not because my son's name is this, but Victor Page. Those guys immediately come to mind. They weren't just, players that were, good. These guys were dudes, man. They could play and they were tough, skilled. Jerome Williams. Georgetown had a reputation for toughness. What they lacked for skill, they would just kind of beat you up, man. Like they weren't known as like essentially a sniping 3-point team. This team was, we're going to throw it up and we're going to go get it. And if we miss, and likely if we miss, we're going to get the offensive rebound and dunk on your head. So fast forward now to seeing Ed Cooley at the helm, brings, I think, obviously a mix of hope and I think admittedly some reservations from some Georgetown fans, but as long as Georgetown is back in the national conversation, or at least back in the top 25, it can be a definite game changer for the Big East, which is obviously what everyone wants. I can have Big 12 guys on. We can talk about later in the week how Coach K floated about the Big East ACC merger, things of that nature. But if the Big East wants to survive and kind of create a merger or essentially kind of continue on its own with a basketball powerhouse, it's important for a team like Georgetown to return as a perennial powerhouse. I'm not saying I'm excited about it because, if they get better, maybe they beat us once a year or whatever, but it's good to have rivalries. It's good to go into DC and know that you have to strap it up and be ready. So it's a boost for the Big East. And more importantly, it's a boost for UConn because this win will look a hell of a lot better than it did last year. And so I can't wait to kind of revive this rivalry and have it continue when they come back to Connecticut to play us, and maybe we'll see them in the Big East tournament. So let's move on though. I want to talk about my takeaways from the game coming up after the break. This message is from Intuit TurboTax. Taxes, we're dealing with piles of paperwork and frustrating forms, and then waiting and wondering whether you're going to get any money back. Now, taxes, it's so much easier when you're uploading forms to TurboTax, who's matched to your unique tax situation. An expert who's backed by the latest technology with cross-checks millions of data points for 100% accuracy while they work on your taxes. You get real-time updates on their progress, and you get the most money back guarantee, all while you're going about your day. No stressing, no worrying, no waiting. Now, this is how taxes should be done. Intuit TurboTax. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live Full Service. Real-time updates only with iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. And you're back on Locked On UConn with your host, Mark Zanetto here. Let's dive into the game and kind of my thoughts, focusing on individual performances, and then what I felt was kind of like the team's and Dan's overall strategy. First, the rotation. Starting with Stewie, he didn't contribute much offensively. He missed a dunk early. Thought that was kind of a sign of things to come, which sucked. But I thought Jaden Ross played pretty well, hitting a three-pointer and making a fantastic reverse layup. Hit a great block, but didn't finish the play and ended up getting a foul. But his energy was good, and it was the positive takeaway on that. Aidan Mahaney was more comfortable. It seems like things are slowing down a little bit for him on the court, which is great to see. He had a nice drive against Georgetown's Peavy, who is known for his defensive capabilities. And honestly, that kid's going to be in the NBA. He's 6'8". He's athletic as all hell. And seeing Aidan kind of get to the hoop on him, and score against a plus defender who is going to be guarding, guys in the NBA, shows the growing confidence and capability that Aidan has. So that's, that Mahaney magic may be starting to kind of happen a little bit. It doesn't have to be 15 points every night, right? Georgetown is ranked 30th in the country defensive efficiency wise. So for UConn to put together a 17-2 run and essentially end the game early really speaks volumes about their offensive capabilities. So that drive by Aidan in particular was a highlight, showing his ability to really handle pressure and really make some plays against a top tier defense that bodes well in the future. Ahmad Noel, look, I joked around on social media saying that I deserve the credit for his play because I asked Dan Hurley in the press conference. I don't have the audio, but I was on the media availability where I asked him, what about Ahmad Noel? What about what do you see from him? What's it going to take essentially for him to play? And essentially Dan was really candid, right? I think what struck me about his response, and I say this in all the candor that he gives us, which is, when I asked the question, it was the last question of the press conference. So he could have answered it really, really slowly, right? Or really kind of, I don't want to say shyly or what's the word I'm looking for? Kind of like cheeky, where he's just like, yeah, he's just got to work harder, stuff like that. But he literally dove in and said, Ahmad practices hard. With Liam out, there's room in the rotation. He's got to find ways to stay on the court as a young player in a really old sport right now. Because what he was referencing to, some people questioned that about how, there are some freshmen like a Cooper Flagg and, some others who are playing prominent roles as freshmen. Yeah, but they're also not playing on teams that have older players ahead of them. And some of those guys, you have to be undeniable. And I've said that before, and I think that's something that Dan kind of echoed in his statement, where he said even top freshmen have to do what guys like, Solo did, Hawk, Donovan Clingan, what Jay Stu did last year in the Big East tournament, kind of maximizing opportunities, right? And then he added, when Solo got chances last year, it was more than just playing solid. It was tip dunks, it was deep threes. Playing in big moments. This is his comment. So Ahmad had 6 minutes in the first half of last game, and now he got 9 today. So the whole point is, Dan mentioned this. Last thing he said was, our rotation is not set. We're still searching as a team right now. As a player, you've got to make the coach confident in you. The opportunities are there, and we're looking for guys to step up. So fast forward to the game. I thought Ahmad played really well. And the reason why I say that is because he did do some extra stuff. He got a great steal, was denying his man. They tried to catch him backdoor. He denied it. And he was also able to kind of work pick and roll and get down the lane and drive on 2 layups. He missed a 3. He missed 2 threes. One was at the end of the shot clock. People thought he dribbled a little too much on that. I think that's also kind of by design too. Like I know that they don't want him to just kind of like, dribble around for the entirety of the shot clock, but they tend to do it with Haas when they have big leads. So I thought what you saw from Ahmad was a kid who does not fear the playing time, does not worry about, if he does something wrong. He's just out there playing. And I think that is a really good sign for UConn going forward. So as far as the rest of the team, right, in terms of defense, I thought Samson Johnson was efficient, scoring 9 points, grabbing 5 rebounds, which is a phenomenal clip for Samson because he's had some issues with defensive rebounding in 27 minutes. It'd be great to see him hitting double digits maybe in rebounds with 27 minutes, maybe 8 or 9, especially considering Terrace only played 12 minutes and had 5 rebounds in half the time. So Hassan Diarra, quite a game offensively, but quite a game, not necessarily offensively, but was solid in his role as the general. He was quiet. I wrote that as quiet because I'm reading my notes. It's interesting to note that the dynamic between Stewie and Ross, right? So Jay Stu and Jay Ross, whichever one seems to get the starting nod or the praise, tends to underperform. Stewie didn't score any points. He played solid defense, which is great. He had 24 minutes, so he's obviously earned the extra minutes with Liam out. But if Stewie and Ross, man, if Jay Ross can put it together and Jay Stu can put it together in the same game consistently, the sky's the limit. And we're not talking about 17, 20-point performances. We're talking about Jay Ross had 7 points. I believe he had 2 steals. I think he had a block. So like, if you get that same production from Jay Stu, then we're talking like exponential growth of this team, right? Because there's always, lastly but not leastly, Alex Karaban. Tough game against Villanova where he missed those 2 critical free throws. But what did Dan tell him to do? Go home and rub the rings together, the championship rings, and feel like you're, realize all the things you've done for this team. I know Dave Borges put out a great article about how Alex was really appreciative of the fan support, his family, his friends. He's like, but it was Dan Hurley who really kind of put him over the top with like, hey, man, just sometimes you got to eat. You know what I mean? Like you have to just own it and move on, and gave him the confidence to continue to lead this team. And he bounced back in a big way. Dan obviously lifted his spirits, reminding him of those past successes, the importance of moving forward. And what happened? 19 points on 7 of 10 shooting. I think 6 rebounds, 3 blocks, 4 assists. Dude was great. So shout out to the Captain America, Alex Karaban. I will not accept any Alex Karaban slander on this show. And so with that, we're going to get to the next segment. And honestly, I wish my co-host, Dan Mead, was here because he sent me some really great notes. We're going to go over them in the next episode for those who value Dan's opinion. And we're going to talk about that coming up after the break. Attending the 12-team college football playoff has to be an incredible experience, right? Bringing fans together like never before. Right now we have Notre Dame and Ohio State in the national championship game. Gametime has an amazing new feature called Gametime Picks that makes finding tickets even easier. It filters out the fluff to show you all the best deals on great seats, saving you time and effort by cutting through the noise. When it comes to getting tickets for the best events, I've already started planning how I can use Gametime to set my parents up with amazing seats for the Big East tournament. They're just a train ride away from Madison Square Garden, and these games would potentially be unforgettable for them. So, and the idea of watching them live is something I'm excited to make happen for them. So, take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, we're back on the program. Last segment of the episode. Couple things. Number one, the game itself was solid. Obviously, getting up 64-41. really showed what we can do offensively. I thought defensively we played pretty well. My co-host Dan Meehan has been ill. He's been having, I think he has some issues, whatever, in terms of like, I don't know if it's the flu or whatnot. We wish him well, and obviously he's going to be back as soon as he gets healthy. But he sent me some notes over the weekend of the Georgetown game, and he highlighted several key points, starting with Ada Mahaney's improved level of play on the court. He had the same thoughts that I did, that he felt like there was comfort there. Noted how UConn's 18-4 run from the 12 to 6 minute mark in the second half was a crucial turning point. Dan also praised, and this is Dan Meehan, also praised Solo Ball's continued impressive 3-point shooting, which obviously is phenomenal. He was 3 of 8, so just under 50% again, and emphasized Ahmad's ability to get into the lane and seal off defenders. However, a couple things he pointed out, right? Dan pointed out that Ahmad needs to work on moving the ball around more and getting teammates involved with less dribbling, and that will come with experience. Mentioned that as well. I think those are obviously the obvious stuff, but he also highlighted and mentioned about UConn's defensive engagement throughout the game, noting how Georgetown couldn't get anything going in the second half due to UConn's defense, and I thought that was 1,000% true. I thought UConn actually drove to the basket a little more. I think he also mentions that later in his coverage, and that led to UConn getting a better whistle. I think he observed that UConn's closing 8 minutes were sloppy. We also acknowledge that as well, but still managed to cover that 5.5 point spread. So if you bet on UConn, you won some money. Good for you. UConn got out rebounded 29-31, committed 21 fouls compared to Georgetown's 12. Still an area that needs to improve. So yes, and I agree with Dan there. If he was on the show right now, I would say that's true, that we do need to foul less. But I do think when you're playing some of these Big East battles, it's when you foul, it's the situation versus how and how many. So that would be the only thing I would say. Wrapping up what some of Dan's reflections was, he highlighted, obviously Alex's bounce back performance, 19 points, 6 rebounds, 4 assists on 70% shooting. Just as I did, Jaden Ross, a solid performance, and noted Stewie's struggles. He concluded by pointing out that Solo Ball's reliability as a 15-point per night scorer is drawing eerily similar comparisons to Jordan Hawkins' performance last season. And then let me go to his notes, because the thing that I loved about what Dan sent me is he always does a deep dive on the efficiency stuff, right? So now Solo has 47 3-point field goals in 17 games. Jordan Hawkins had 48 through his first 17 games of the 22-23 season. So Hawk was just under 40%, 39.2. Solo's 44%. So obviously UConn won the game 68-60. We mentioned it earlier. They upped their Big East record to 5-1, 13-4 overall. Curious to see if they drop a little bit in the poll. They were 9 with the loss to Villanova. It looks like they probably will drop out of the top 10, but we'll see. At the conclusion of the game, UConn's defensive rating moved up to 113. I think they were in the 130s. So that's a good, nice little jump there. Hope that continues on Saturday against Creighton. Their UConn's strength of schedule is now top 40. And just to give you an idea of some of the teams that are, decent and playing, and you're going to notice some of these names. These are top 10 level teams or top 20 level teams that have terrible strength of schedules, right? Maryland's is at 209. Texas Tech at 203. Gonzaga, who we played at 43. Tennessee, who was recently number 1 in the country and lost, is 93. Florida, who beat Tennessee by about 40 points, is 103. Iowa State, who's the third-ranked team in the country, is 85. And, of course, the statistical and efficiency darlings, Houston Cougars, are 63. So UConn with a top 40 strength of schedule. So it looks like the Big East conference play isn't really hurting them as much as people are saying. UConn has played a top 40 strength of schedule and lost 3 of their last 4 games by a combined 5 points. So all the people that are throwing dirt on this UConn team because they lost on the road by 2 points to Villanova in a 6,500 sandbox, person sandbox in Villanova's campus, need to relax a little bit. This team is still a Final Four contending team. This team's still going to compete for a national championship, and we're going to be there to cover it. So, again, sorry for the no live show over the weekend. Hopefully, this satisfied the Georgetown, reaction need, and I will be back later today with a women's show covering their win over the weekend against Georgetown as well. And we'll have some other great stuff for you later this week. That's another episode of Locked On UConn. Make sure you stay locked in, stay connected. Make sure the toughness meters are matching Dan Hurley's huddles that we see a little snippet of. Definitely, maybe not locked in as much as he is at practice, unless you're a little red. Anyway, go Huskies.
Go Huskies.